Tara, you're a makeup girl. Why did the little girl bring lipstick and eyeshadow to school?
Can't
Because
imagine.
she had a makeup test.
Oh,
I love it.
School's out for summer.
So cute. I love it.
I love it. I love it.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Huddle on Wednesday, where Tara and I talk about everything related to relationships and communication, because we know that with better communication, we create better relationships, which create better businesses, better families, better friends, better everything. So before we dive into our question today, which is, are you highly social or are you deeply social? I want to bring us into the present moment with a few questions. So I want to start with Lizette because I love her on camera. She's looking beautiful today. Lizette, what time is it?
The time is now.
That's right. The only time there is, the time where there is no anxiety or depression. We were talking about that just before we started, just to be present. And let's see. I want to ask Rashida. Rashida, how are you and who are you going to hug today?
I am fine. I'm fantastic. Awesome. And who I'm going to hug today? I'm going to hug two of my grandkids that is staying here with me. And I'm also going to hug my favorite tree in the backyard.
Ooh, I love it. We've got a tree hugger. Thank you, Rashida. I love that. And Gio, I'm going to ask you our final questions, which is, where are you and what are you grateful for today?
Because I had in the little fridge.
I am here. I am here. And what am I grateful for? I am grateful for Zoom.
Oh, thank you. I am too. It brings us together and allows us to do this every Wednesday and every other day of the week. Wonderful. Well, now that we're here and now in the present, and we are the way we say we are, which is excited and happy. And I am curious to dig into this because unlike most weeks, Tara and I have not spent a lot of time talking about this. So I'm kind of excited about what's about to unfold in the conversation. So Tara, this was inspired by you. Tell us, start us off with, are you highly social or are you deeply social?
Thank you, Kathryn. I am also delighted to be here. And I want to tell you a little bit of background about where the question came from. As many of you know, I am studying neuroscience and human behavior almost daily, learning as much as I can. And through those studies, I decided that I am deeply social and I am not highly social. And I made up those terms, but I've continued to embrace them the more I study my behavior versus other people's behavior. And this past weekend, a giant light was shined on the fact that I believe I'm deeply social. So before I dig into that experience, I want to explain what I mean by each of those so that might be helpful to others if you too might find yourself being more deeply social than highly social. One of my favorite people to read his work is a man by the name of Matthew Lieberman. And he has discovered, he's a social neuroscientist from UCLA, and he spends an enormous amount of time in the lab. He wrote a book called Social, but what he tells us is something that we know innately, but he has proven it through many, many studies of watching the brain, and is that we are wired to be social. Whether you believe you are shy, socially anxious, or an introvert, or an extrovert, or somewhere on that spectrum, he has the science to prove that we all need social connection. We actually, and interesting, we have 3 different neural networks that prove this, and I won't go into that detail right now, but the science is there. So if we say to ourselves, well, I prefer to be alone, I get energy from being alone, then that begs the conversation, what we've learned about introverts. Maybe you get more energy from being alone, but you still need social interaction. So here's what I've discovered about myself. And I've learned some ways to navigate the way that I'm genetically made. So social anxiety is experiential. It's nurtured. Whether or not we're confident in social situations or not is almost completely due to our life experiences. But whether we're innately introverted or more extroverted, that's genetics. And I am more introverted. And when I say to people, I don't like networking, they're always stunned. They're like, oh, but you're good at it. I don't choose to do that as something that fills me up. It is work for me. But I'll tell you what does fill me up more than being alone is having a deep, rich, vulnerable conversation that's inspiring. For example, on the couch of Kathryn Sabol, or with other close friends, or even with people I don't know, and we take the conversation into something emotional. So I want to share an experience over the past weekend that helped me to even break this down further, and in hopes that it will help you to analyze your social needs so that you can lean into what helps you to be the best version of yourself socially and personally. I went to a retreat this past weekend, and it was a women's retreat. 10 people were there, and the retreat was designed it was designed by a woman who is a master at the art of encaustic painting. And the retreat was designed to teach the art of encaustic painting. There were some other activities, but the main focus was this art. And the woman who put on the retreat she became a client of mine about 2 years ago. And this is an important part of the story. She became a client of mine about 2 years ago because I helped her to write her about page and her artist statement and helped her to put really her passion and art into words. Through that experience, we became very good friends. So I feel deeply connected to her art and the world of encaustic painting. However, I've never, ever actually seen her use, let me explain. Encaustic painting is molten pigmented wax that you paint with, and then you light it on fire with a torch and you move it around, and that's how the paintings come to life. So I go to this retreat that she's in charge of, and I walk into an art gallery on Friday night in Park City, Utah, and there are 10 women with wine and snacks and chatting. And it was extremely stressful for me. And I said hi to people, where are you from? And I was tired and I was a little bit drained. And you can imagine, I was just kind of going through the motions of that. And I left as soon as it was natural to leave and acceptable. And I thought about the fact that I'm deeply social. And I didn't have any deeply social interactions during that so-called cocktail party. So whose fault is that? The next morning, I got up and I went to the beginning of the retreat. And we chatted a little bit. We did some yoga, not a lot of interaction. And then Penny, the artist, who was also my friend, she began to demonstrate her art. And when she started painting and talking about it and took that torch to the paint, tears just started pouring down my eyes. And they were tears of this most immense joy, because I had tried to write about this. I tried to understand it and bring it to life through words for her. And there I was watching what I had put words to come to life. And so obviously that sparked a reaction and caused some deep social connections with the women in that room. Well, we don't always have the opportunity to go from chatting about weather to tears, do we? So if you find yourself to be more comfortable in deeply social conversations, I actually know how to respond to that. I've worked at it. And that's what I'd like to share. It was my fault and my responsibility that that cocktail party was not pleasant for me, because I allowed the conversations to surface. And extroverted people get energy from that, and they can go from person to person and meet as many people as they can, and that fills them up. I'd rather meet 3 people and get to know what makes them tick. Well, some people are not open to that. So here's how I navigate being a deeply social person. when I meet someone, and I'll just give a couple examples, and they might tell me what they do. Let's take something that's very, very what we used to call left brain or prefrontal cortex. I meet someone who's a financial analyst, and they tell me a little bit about their work. I could continue to ask about their work, or I could remember that I am deeply social, and I can ask questions about the human side of their work. For example, I might say, tell me about your worst client you've ever had, or the best client you've ever had. That usually is embraced with like, wow, it's such a different question, and it causes someone to open up a little bit their vulnerable side. And there ignites a deeply social conversation, even at a cocktail party. So we can take this strategy, and when I focus on it, and I remember to do what Kathryn and I talk about a lot, which is to be curious and to wondrous and ask questions about the human side of someone's life. Again, it sparks a whole new conversation. I'll give one more example, and then I'd love to open this up to some conversation, Kathryn. A lot of times women, particularly, we talk about, if we happen to be mothers, we talk about our children. And we talk about our children in a way of facts. Like I met one woman and I said, oh, tell me about your children. So she said, well, this one's at Auburn and this one's in Colorado and this is her job, and facts. And those are essential to the next step of the conversation. This particular woman had 4 children. So rather than continuing to lean into the facts, I asked her this question. I said, wow, 4 children. I wonder what you've learned as a mother about self-care through navigating a life with 4 children that close together in age. And that completely changed the conversation from factual to emotional. And that's where I light up. So that's what I'm trying to practice. And a light was shined on it this weekend through an unbelievable experience. And so I focused on that the rest of the weekend, is causing the conversations to be something that would mean something to me and help me to be a better contributor to that retreat. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are on this, Kathryn. I don't want to keep talking all by myself. I'm an introvert, you know.
Well, I love that you shared it. That 2 things are coming up for me. And, you know, the first is about the responsibility, because I get stuck off sometimes, maybe often, in showing up somewhere and wanting something like this deep, you know, wanting connection, but not bringing it. You know, like I hope it'll happen to me. Like I hope I'll naturally fall into a conversation or meet somebody that's interesting. But really, we have a lot more control over that situation than we give ourselves credit for. Just like you're describing, doesn't matter who's in the room. Everyone is interesting, you know, some more than others, you know, or the conversation could go better. So it's taking responsibility, setting an intention, and then getting really clear. Oh, this is going to be what I make it tonight, regardless of the setting. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is the questions. I love the questions because you're talking about asking powerful questions, you know, and as a coach, I've had to get skilled at that because that opens people up, and then we start talking about really what's important to them. And I think naturally people do tend to be at the surface level in social situations, facts, data, you know, where do you work? What do you do? You know, how was your trip? But I love where you're pointing about, you know, what's the worst client you've ever had? One I love to ask is, what are you excited about that's coming up in your life? And I think 2 things happen. One, people we're, you know, these neural pathways are pretty well set. So, and our brain's pattern. So I'm in a social situation, all the other social situations I've been in, this is how the conversation goes. And when you throw in a curveball, like, what's the worst client you've ever had? The brain stops and people have to get really present and think through that question. So it brings people right into the moment. And then that's also where that connection really happens. So I love what you're saying. And it's not that hard. It's actually quite easy.
It is. Once you're intentional about it, and you know, it takes practice. And on that Friday night, I was not intentional about it, and I was not proud of myself because I went home just feeling like anxious. But I think I would be remiss if I didn't share the fact that sometimes when I put that into practice and I ask those type of questions, they're not always embraced. Not everybody's like me.
Mhm.
Some people prefer to keep things a little bit more factual and light, and they're more comfortable in that setting. And you know
Mhm.
what? That's okay. I would never encourage to push that on somebody. If
Mhm.
they push back and they're like, "Whoa, I don't know that," and
Mhm.
that's the risk that I choose to take in order to make deep connections on this earth. And it is a risk.
Mhm.
I certainly could keep things light and social. I've studied too about if introverts or extroverts are more vulnerable. Now, before I answer what I've uncovered, what would be your guess? Which of those two have a tendency to be more vulnerable?
Oh gosh, just a high level guess. I would think introverts.
Mhm. So I know innately that I'm more introverted and I'm more vulnerable than the average person for sure. But I am desperate for some research on this topic because that's not what I've uncovered. There's not been a lot of research, but it's what I've read states that extroverts have more courage to be vulnerable.
Hmm.
I find that extroverts, that's part of the reason why they're extroverted, is because they don't want to sit and get too deep. That's when it gets uncomfortable for them. So they continue to stay light. So I don't have the answer, but wow, if I were Matthew Lieberman, that'd be my next study. So
I love it. And there's a question in the chat about what do you mean by vulnerable conversation in this setting?
So in a social setting, there's so many different definitions of vulnerable. So thank you for asking that question. But one of the most beautiful ways that I've seen being vulnerable explained is that you're open to learning from others, that you're not so confident in what you believe and what you think, that you're not opening yourselves to say, maybe I could rethink this, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I could learn from you. Being vulnerable just is, it is a way of being open and honest and courageous.
Mhm.
So not just giving the surface answers to things or being less than truthful because something's uncomfortable. Help me, Kathryn. I wasn't.
Yeah, no, I think that's true.
Studied vulnerability. I'm not doing a very good job of it.
No, I think that's true. So you're talking about courage to be open and curious. And the other thing that's coming up about introverts and extroverts is it's really a choice to be vulnerable. So it kind of makes me wonder, is it really tied to, is there a correlation between vulnerability and extroversion or introversion version, or are they not linked really at all? And it really has to do with confidence, courage to just, because I might be courageous enough to go be by myself and get curious about what's going on with me, So I don't know, I'm in the question of that too, but I do think that vulnerability is open to sharing yourself, open to being present and curious about another person, and willing to learn. I think those are a great way to describe it.
This, as I'm listening to you, it made me think in our retreats, one of the ways that we've helped people to lean into their vulnerability is to ask 2 questions. And those both take some courage, which is vulnerable, is what are you proud of about yourself? Not your sayings and accomplishments, but what are you proud of as it relates to your traits? And what are you insecure about? And to express those 2 things is very vulnerable, both of them.
Especially in a group setting, absolutely, because it takes some awareness to go inside and then to admit that and say it out loud it's been powerful. That's been a really powerful part of the retreats and seeing other people. Because as we've talked about before, once you do something like that, you invite others to meet you that way in the conversation. So when you show up with courage and vulnerability and authenticity, then you're inviting other people to come into that space with you.
Absolutely. And I think it also helps us to understand the difference. And we've talked about this a good bit, the difference between saying that certain things are private. And so I don't want to be vulnerable because that's private, and that those are not the same thing. Your privacy is your privacy, but being honest about your perspective, your thoughts, your feelings, that's being vulnerable. That invites connection, which builds strength.
I love that. And I would love to hear from others, either are they, what they're learning about being highly social or deeply social, and what they're taking away about that, because I think as I'm listening to you, I'm having awarenesses about myself also. And so I'm curious, if others are feeling that same way too. I just have never thought about it before.
There's so much more to be learned, I think. in this conversation, because there's not a person on here who's not social at all.
Right, right.
You know, how we want to be social it's very individual, and it's partly based on our life experiences from the time we were a child all the way through to who we are today. And a part of it is truly genetic. And now I see Cece, I definitely want to hear what you have to say, but I'll finish this thought real quickly. You know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs says that we first need the basics, which are like food, water, shelter. And then after that, then we need social connection. And Lieberman says that's not so. Think about when you're a baby. You can't get to food or water or shelter without socialization. Creative. So I thought that was fascinating. I think Cece had her hand up first, but now she's gone away, maybe. I don't know. Are you still there, Cece? Oh, there she is. Yes, talk to us.
Oh, I thank you so much for this subject. I find myself being more social these days because that's the only way that I'll learn about myself. And yes, I am very vulnerable to be authentic in sharing those fears that do come up when I do communicate with other people. And they actually show more respect towards me when I say what is actually going on the inside, because no one really actually knows. Usually I try to shut down, but today I'm out. I am out being transparent about fears or thoughts or experiences like feelings. I'm authentic with it, where before I would go hide and be an introvert. So now I have come out, and I'm learning through you guys too, how to be with it and be with other people. And thank you so much.
I love what you said about, you know, being social is helping you to learn more about yourself. That's so wise. So thank you. Mic drop.
Yes. I agree, because we've talked about that, Tara, that like we can only see ourselves when we're bouncing. It's like light is only seen when it's bouncing off of other objects. And I feel like we are similar in that way, that we can see and learn about ourselves when we're, you know, bouncing off other people and hearing how they see us and, you know, interacting with them. So I agree. I love that. Rashida.
Hi, good morning. Good morning. I'm telling you, Tara and Kat, just great topic. And why I say great topic is that if people see me, and trust me, I think I'm introvert. And some people see me that I'm just, see me here, I'm coming, I'm here. But trust me, it's all about the setting and the place and time to really focus on the crowd that is around. And one of the things that is like I say to my sisters and friends, oh, I'm introvert. I choose to 9 years ago, I choose to pack myself out of New York City into the deep part of the Poconos Mountain. And I live by myself. Always, mind you, I always have a pet just to keep my company, just to be able to speak to him, because he don't speak back to me. So trust me, it's one of those, this topic is so important to me, because I always, and this is the only thing I can say, that being an earthbird and being that happy-go-lucky person is because I speak my mind. I'm going to tell you exactly how it is and how it's going to be. And one of the things that I find out, that my friend them call me just to hear the truth, because he said, that you ain't going to say, I'm going to give them exactly what they don't want to hear. So being an introvert, trust me, it's work for me at all time. I can be the quiet person in the room, and somebody else come and ask me a question, and I take it a whole long conversation. So trust me, the topic well taken. And Cece, I love your point that you make, Cece. Thank you so much, guys.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You know, it takes, I think, true courage. That's a form of love, to tell people what they don't want to hear. If you can do that well, Kathryn is brilliant at that. So thank you. That's a great reminder.
Well, I think you also have to read your audience too and know who's going to receive it well and who isn't. There's a time and a place, you know, when we are able to do that, I think. So thank you. Gio, I want to hear what you have to say.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Great conversation. I was thinking as you guys were creating that vulnerability has been something that I have grown. It's something that has come along with my own growth and development.
Mhm.
That it didn't come intuitive. I would say that I am more introvert than anything else. Extrovert. I don't shine in networking events, and it's not easy for me. I certainly appreciate deep conversations a lot more. And however, being vulnerable, wasn't the thing I got until I started doing a lot of work in my own growth and development. And then in this process, one day, I had enough of myself or what I was carrying at the time, and I had to say something, and I felt like my world was about to come to an end, like people were about to discover me. And that felt like, whoa, this is I have to do it, but it's too much. And then in that process, I discovered that being vulnerable in a social setting is my access to my confidence, is my access to my self-esteem, is my access to all these things that I now find that are now are easy for me. They really have come from sharing my fears, my secrets, all of my fears, right? In a social setting. There
Mhm.
certainly has been vulnerability, has been my access to my leadership, if you will.
Mhm.
That's what I
Wow,
wanted to say.
powerful. Thank you.
It is. Well, this has been amazing. I think, I didn't really see it going towards vulnerability as part of it, but it has to be, right? Because we're talking about social connections, social situations. And, I think that vulnerability and authenticity is the foundation for creating deep, meaningful connection, which is being deeply social.
Absolutely. I sometimes regret that I don't have what my daughter has, which is that gift of gab. Like she can just keep chatting. And there's just always something to say. I don't have that in me, but I have other gifts and I need to remind myself of that. And I think it'd be pretty cool to close us out with our 7 tenets, but stop for just a moment and think about them as they relate to being social, and whichever way we are thrown and slapped together and curated by the universe to be, whether we're more deeply social or more highly social. We can throw my strategies about asking intentional questions out the window, and we can just choose to lead with a mindset of love. When we decide to love people, beautiful things happen. And when we don't take ourselves too seriously and we let our head go back in laughter, beautiful things happen. When we choose to give, when we choose to listen and learn and give first rather than receive and tell and teach, beautiful things happen. And how can we show up and be this person who's able to love and give and laugh? We have to take care of ourselves. We have to get our sleep, and we have to eat more plants, and we have to stress less. And then, of course, we cannot sit here on our booties all day long. We've got to move that body. So until next time, Daily Huddlers, much love to you all.
Everybody. Thank you for coming today. Thanks, everybody. See you all next time.
Good to see you,
Thank
Tom.
you. Thank you.
Yeah, all right.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you for
One
having
love,
us.
guys.
Tara.
One love.
Thank you, Kathryn.
Thank you, Tara.
Bye.
Thank you, Kathryn. Thank you, family.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye now.